The prayers are powerful. We are fighting for Tupac Jana, water is life. Wendsler, when I first met Wendsler, I remember it was at the boxing gym in San Carlos. And I remember listening to him. He opened up his home to me and listening to him. And I remember going up to him and telling him, "You are a very wise man, Wendsler, and I respect you a lot." Because I know that he opens his heart and his mind to Yusin, the Creator. And it channels through him in these words that he has, these visions that he has. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for his mom for raising him to be a warrior for our Ne people. I'm grateful for the words that he shares and the strength that he endures in himself and for the people of our community back home. And not just for our people, like Naelyn was saying, but for people all around the world. He fights for our water, for, not just in there, but in Globe, the kids there in Miami. And even in Queen Creek in the Valley, we're walking for those kids and those people. And those who are not awake, let's continue to keep them in prayer. Every day, let's continue to keep them in our prayer. Without further ado, I would like to welcome a former chairman and a former councilman of Peridot District, Mr. Wendsler Nosie.
First, I just really want to thank everybody for being here. I really want to thank all the organizers, to bring us here to Tucson. And throughout the years, there's so many of you. I look around the room, I recognize almost all of you with all the efforts and all the things that you've done. Allison, as always, I just wish, and pray that there's a documentary or news coverage so her voice can reach all over America and her be heard as well, because what she says is so important for all of us. And with everything else that you all do in your own life, I just want to say thank you, and especially for being here tonight. For the boys that are here, they sing an ancient song for you. We don't make songs up like recording artists will come out with a new hit song and a new hit song. Well, we don't have that. These songs are mandated, and it's been passed on from generation to generation. So what's really neat for some of you that may not know, the music, the prayers of the Apache is here, and it came here to be with you. And it's very rare, only so many people get the opportunity. These boys are heading up the sweat up at Oak Flats, and we have a lot of returning people from Standing Rock coming to Oak Flats, and not just from Oak Flats, but from around a different country and here in the United States coming for blessings. And they've heard about Oak Flats, they've heard about the spirituality of it and how it's being held together. So I just wanted to share that with you, because again, going back to the video, that's like 2 years ago. And there's so many things that have happened since that time. And so, in a funny way of putting it, it's kind of like the MASH unit, where now Oak Flat is taking in all these people who are in need. And I tell them that this place doesn't need a preacher, a reverend, holy person, native, is that you have to go there yourself. You have to make your journey. Because for me, as much as all these things I do, when I'm there at Oak Flats or any sacred place, this place is holier than me. It has all those special meanings. And if you give it time to listen, and it hears you, and then it begins to talk to you. And not only Native people, but people that have come across and have come to Oak Flat have gained something from it, which is spiritual, and only they can identify with that. But collectively, it becomes a holy place for all of us. And so from that point to where we are, this is where Oak Flat has really originated from, because of the sacredness of our gone people, which is, I guess if you look at it from a religious sense, it's no different than what they call saints. what probably you would say the Catholics, how they have saints or, people who did things. Well, it's the same thing for us. Those people before and during the time of creation were brought back to this world to be the buffer between heaven and earth. And that's where those spiritual beings, no different than any of the old religion, no different. It's the same thing. And they have that uniqueness. But the thing about it is that we all got to remember in America that we're here in North America, where God touched the place in this way. Now, I'm sure if we go to Europe, it'd be somewhat the same, but in a little different way because of the way the environment is. But it's identical to each other. And so it's really sad for us, for not just the Apaches, but all the tribes that, we're kind of put separate and different when we shouldn't be. But this is the place, and this is what has been happening the last 2 years. And, the other thing that I'm really excited about, and people kind of laugh, and I tell my family, I said, when I talk to people, I try to use an example that everybody's familiar with. And I always go back to John the Baptist. I say when John the Baptist was making his way, the way I understand it, he was talking about this coming. And every time Naelyn talks, I'm like, there it is. There she is. There's the message. Listen. And even me, as a grandfather, I listen to her. Because I tell her, I guess like for an example, when I was telling the boys, I said, talking with Duke, I said, take Mount Lemmon over there. I said, I know that in my lifetime, I'm not going to make it to the top. But with Naelyn's age and people her age, they're going to make it to the top. And right now, she's already forecasting what the top is and what the other side looks like. But as a grandfather, it's for me to get her as far as I can because the rest of the journey is going to be hers. And I'm not going to be there. And that's similar to religious belief about like John the Baptist, and I always sit back and just hear the message and take what she's giving. It's sad in this world, there's jealousy, and that's a part of the dilemma on religious belief when there's jealousy, or because you're Native or you're not Native, or you're African American or you're white. I mean, it's terrible that we have that. If we didn't have that, that'd be a lot better world. Because for me, even though with all the work I've done for all these years that I feel like since I was born, I take a step back when it comes to my granddaughter because she's been touched with something very special. Because I always remember when she had her sunrise dance on Mount Graham, and I remember my daughter, her and I get in a little discussion because I told her that, we've been exiled out of these places. And if we're going to go back to these holy places, it's not a joke. And you just can't do it just to want to do it. And you can't, be pulled into it. And I always remember her coming back to me with Naelyn and Naelyn telling me that, Papa, I'm ready. I understand this. Because what we got to remember is that our people were exiled out of there. And we couldn't allow to go back to these sacred places. And so here's my granddaughter, my own daughter, telling me that, we got to go back. And then my mother's era was born on the reservation from a family who were prisoners of war. And then the migration came where we now live and where I was born. And so that's kind of like the... well, how many people seen Rise on Oak Flats last week? Anybody? Okay, for those of you who've seen it, on that one part when I say that social illness dies with me. And what I was referring to was all that has happened, to where I'm at today and behind me is we need to kill that social disease so that our children don't carry that forward. And that's what I was referring to, that I want that disease to die. I don't want to carry it forward with my children and my grandchildren. So anyway, Naelyn pushed, and for the first time since the 1800s, we had a sunrise dance up at Mount Graham. And Mount Graham is tied to Oak Flats because the spirit resonates from both areas. And so as I said, these are the real of how we were before we were prisoners of war. And so when we were held as prisoners of war in San Carlos, it wasn't until the 1940s, the late 40s, that they allowed us to do one of the first sunrise dance. Because to the American military, these dances were considered a war against them. And so we suffered not having it until really it started to take off in the early 70s. But people were kind of afraid to do it openly, but we did it anyway, but not in the numbers that we do it today. But Naelyn wanted her sunrise dance back where it originated from. And so her dance was the first dance that was off the reservation into territory that we were exiled back into our Holy Land. And I will never forget the last 5 songs, because the clouds that come in, we call it Lacos. And when Lacos are spirit people, this is the time that they can walk the earth. So anytime the clouds are on the top of the mountain, it's for us not to be there because it's their time. So anyway, I always remember the last 5 songs, because the requirements are 5 songs to end. And I always remember those clouds coming in, and we're watching it as Apaches. And being the first time back on this holy mountain and all the ritual things that we know and we believe, here comes Lacos, and we're like, oh no, we're not supposed to be here, you know. But anyway, it came, and I always remember that the outline of the forest, the clouds just came out of it and it stopped. It stopped. Not until the last song was sang that it came in and it closed in on us. And that was her dance. And from that point on, when we came down the mountain, it was a whole different Naelyn. She was not the same anymore. And in the family, we seen that big change. And I remember when she first talked in Salt River, I was just, her uncles, myself, were all crying because we just couldn't believe what she was saying. And that's when I knew where my place was at. My place was on the side to start helping her and guide her and do as much as I can. And so tonight, believe it or not, this is the first time me and Naelyn are on the same stage together. Because she's been going here and there, but you know, she's been keeping the focus, and then I've been going to New York, North Carolina. I've been all over the place. And so we're teasing each other tonight because it's the first time we're together. So I'm really happy to be with her. But again, I hate to be the last one to talk behind her because I just enjoy what she says and what, you know, how powerful she is. But, you know, Naelyn has been through so much, you know, and it's so nice for me to go to North Carolina, you know, New York, Montana, all these places that I've been at, and they always ask me about my granddaughter, you know, and it's so awesome. And because I know where her heart is, I know where her commitment is. She's just a very strong lady, and she really has a really strong message. And I know that her extending the invitation to you is really from her heart, you know, because she does carry something very special. I just wanted to say that, you know, this fight is still on. The repeal ended in December. So right now we're working on the new repeal, and we're going to need a lot of support because, again, it's going to fall back to Gahava to be the first one to be the sponsor of the bill. And then again, going back and meeting with Bernie Sanders and him also being the sponsor of the bill in the Senate. We still have support from the other Senate and House that were co-sponsors, so we have to go back to that. So that's going to be the work that's cut out for us. We're looking probably the middle of this month and on into March. What I will say is what Naelyn had said, that this is collectively, as I said many times, that it was an Apache fight, it was a Native American fight, then we realized it became a state fight, and now it's a country fight. Because if you break it all down, it destroys every one of us. And, you know, we have to be real, you know, about what's happening in D.C. right now. And I'll tell that to you because one of the big fears coming out of Washington now is how how true is the new president to his words and to his commitments? Because everything now is going to be diluted. They're looking at diluting all the environmental laws, NEPA, every one of these laws. They are already attacking tribes. They're looking at tribes' resources on their reservation. And as I said before, that reservations were cut and piecemeal with the stroke of the pen by the president, by executive order. So that's how easy it is for him to do that at any given time. And so it goes back to what I was saying over 20 years ago, that the tribes need to go after entitlement so that we don't worry about things like this. But there's no entitlement. The reservation does still belong to the United States. And so, every day for those of us who understand, we're not sleeping right because we don't know what Trump's going to do. And then it comes back to, because believe it or not, you even have that say about reservations because it's on federal land. Now you come back to all the federal land, all the partials all over the United States. That's under his study, his efforts about doing away with those federal partials. And right now you have governors talking about asking the United States to have the responsibility of federal land. And so, those are really dangerous, for all of us. And I know that with Native Americans, we deal with the government every day. So I'm really proud to say with all the travels I've done, we know more than the states. So, because we know about federal government. And so, but it's important that all Americans know, because you have to remember that, corporations have, a really big piece in this America that we call. And if these federal lands are given up, then there's going to be less safe for all of us. And I know they bring up jobs. I know that's the big thing. Jobs and money, jobs and money, jobs and money, jobs and money. Well, I used to look at the reservation as suppressed, and we live with that suppressed to where our social way of life is a difficult one. So, like an example, when they were talking about the pipeline in Standing Rock, and that's including all reservations, and saying that there's over 50% unemployment on the reservation. I mean, yeah, when you say it like that, it makes it sound really, really bad, how the reservation is, and it also sounds how it could be really suppressed. Because I know that when employment percentage goes up, state of Arizona gets upset, or on a national level, everybody gets upset. Well, what's really crazy is that when we were all put as prisoners of war, it was 100% unemployment. So I'm sitting there like, how many Americans understand, the false numbers they're giving out there to the public? Because when we were as prisoners of war, it was 100% unemployment. And only with what they gave us through the government and with Indian Health is all we had. And everything else was controlled. And I always laugh because a lot of people don't like President Nixon, and they say all the things about President Nixon, but the one thing that he did good for Native Americans was he gave us the Self-Determination Act. And when he gave that to us, it began to eliminate the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so Indian tribes finally had the ability to make decisions about the welfare of the people. And so you don't hear much about it because Congress and everybody else was upset because Nixon actually gave us something. And he gave us to empower ourselves. And so from that point on, the tribe began to work on building revenue. And so with what revenue we built, and I'm only talking about San Carlos because I don't know the numbers of the other tribes, but for San Carlos, we brought down unemployment 40%. We did, not them, we did. So, be careful of the misconception when they kick these things out there, because those are, I tell people that there's only two things that can happen. Number one is that give the entitlement to the tribe, meaning that we have the rights to the land. Because right now we have no rights to the land. So that's why you see no banks. That's why you see the facilities, the way they sit, the way they are. You know, our laws are real bad. We take it to the max to hold criminals for what we can. We only have 2 federal agents from the United States, which means that if one federal agent's in Albuquerque and the one took a drive to Flagstaff, and then we have a death and possibly murder, the body will lay out there until one of them shows up. Because if the tribe moves it or does anything with it, then it's tainted, and then whoever was, you know, the perpetrator or whatever he did, will lose in court because it was tampered. So we have to wait until these federal agents show up. And I always tease everybody, you know, as a white guy, you could beat me up on the reservation, all they'll do, and you could practically almost kill me, but all we can do is escort you to the reservation line until you don't come back. You know, so, but we don't want to tell everybody that. So don't, just leave it here. No. So anyway, I mean, those things that we still face that, you know, comes from the federal government. And then now we have our holy places under attack. And so it's pretty smart how they cornered us and to have less say in America. And that's why I was saying that it's hard to really move your children forward, even in the educational process, because we can't mortgage anything, we can't get a loan for anything, and we have to rely on what we have. And that's why homes look the way they do. And it's really irritating for me when I see McCain and Goldsar do reports and they say these things about us, and I'm like, there's only 2 roads. You give us the entitlement, or either you turn the reservations into like an army base and provide everything for us that they promise. Those are the only 2 things. Other than that, they have us right in a limbo, not to move here or not to move there, making sure that we're not going to be successful. Because once you're done going to school and you come back, you live in San Carlos, it's a whole new world that you didn't know that didn't exist. A lot of the commercials that you see on TV doesn't pertain to us if you're going to stay on the reservation. So I always remember my son talking with me and saying, hey, Dad, you know, I don't know about this decision, but I'm not going to live on the reservation. And I would, you know, kind of feel bad, but he makes a good point. He comes back and he says, I look at you, Dad, with all the things that you have, all the things that you've done, it doesn't amount to anything. And you didn't help us to go to school. We had to fight for this, fight for that, you know, just to go to school. So if I get property off the reservation, I have an asset. So my son ends up living outside the reservation so that he can have something for his children. But we can see, you know, how that's forcing us to continue to change so that we'll eventually lose our reservation, because now we start to degrade who we are and degrade things. So my point is that being suppressed people. So when I look at Arizona, then I look at America, and I look at what, you know, I don't know if there's supporters of Trump in here, but I apologize. But anyway, when I look at the whole picture, he is treating America, all of America, like a suppressed reservation, because everybody is eating up on jobs and money, you know? So I'm like, wow. Here, I just thought the reservation, we were suppressed. That's America's that's suppressed. So that's why when it comes back to what Naelyn is saying, we're all in the same boat, you know? And I always go back to the trip to D.C. when I thought I was going to meet a lot of Native Americans, which I did, but I met a lot of non-Native Americans, and they were carrying the same issue.